The ocean is much deeper than we thought. Part 2. Death can be a beautiful thing, beyond all the stigma associated around the event. It's the beginning of a world that starts directly from the end of another. When a whale dies in extreme depths, they sink towards the ocean floor, when entire ecosystems arise from their decomposing bodies. This is called a whale fall. Mike's EPM suit had left behind 3 days worth of footage. Henry was put on the task of preparing it for viewing. While we couldn't save him, nor the suits, we could at least figure out how Mike died. As we waited, the captain decided it was time for me to learn the truth about the mission, and why no one on the surface had ever heard about the scientific wonder what was Talos. "You saw all the dead sea creatures littering the ocean floor around the station?" Robert asked. I recalled the hundreds of mangled bodies of fish, not the most welcoming sight to the abyss. "James told me something compelled him to dive down here. Some sort of sound." Robert nodded as he pulled up a computer. After a moment of fumbling, he clicked on the sound file. "About 5 years ago, we recorded this coming from the depths of the Tonga Trench. It was an oddly synthetic sound, while a whale's matching call had been pitched down and jumbled around. And in the midst of it, all there was, something sounded like a whisper. They recorded something similar around the Marina Trench and called it biotwang," Robert said. The sound played on a loop as we talked. Oddly eerie for something so innocent. We first thought it came from a whale, just a bit distorted after traveling vast distances, or instrumental interference. But then we saw how it affected the wildlife in the region. Blooms of jellyfish appearing out of nowhere, and fish defying all instincts to dive towards crushing pressure. "What made the sound then?" I asked. Robert pulled up some pictures on the screen. Creatures similar to roundworms, but pitch black. They looked nothing like what I just witnessed in the airlock, however. From what we can tell, there's a thus far completely undiscovered ecosystem somewhere down the trench, isolated for millions of years, unaffected by mass extinction events. They have evolved quite differently from life we see on the surface. It's like millions of single-celled organisms working together to form more complex creatures. But unlike ourselves, the cells can detach and rejoin at will. We've named it the syncytium. That's what killed Mike? They could be part of it, but what we just saw in the airlock is far larger than the microorganisms we've gathered here. Before we could continue, James interrupted, letting us know that the footage was ready to be viewed. If they ever decide to classify the existence of this station, they never mentioned the creatures, nor the sounds that alerted us to their presence. I'm sure one day they hail this all as a supreme technological advancement. But truth be told, the reason why the Navy put billions and billions of dollars into this project, so that humanity could transfer the ocean floor, is simply because they want to find whatever is making that sound, and find a way of using it. "Cap, they're waiting for us," James said. We gathered in the central area. Abby sat in the back, some distance away from everyone else. She seemed even worse for wear than before, frail, as if she'd lost weight in the past couple of hours since meeting her. Henry controlled the footage, ready to speed through the important bits as the descent itself was quite slow. 20,000 feet, the Hadal zone. Everything we saw would be from Mike's point of view. The footage started at the airlock, Abby standing before him with a concerned expression on her face.
Don't worry, I'll be back before you know it. It's not like it's my first time in the depths. It's not like they'd waste $1 billion on me dying anyway.
She didn't seem consoled by his words. This time it's different. We haven't tested the suit beyond 30,000 feet yet, Abby said.
No, but we've tested pressure. The suit should be able to go much further before breaking.
Henry forwarded the footage. Mike stood directly at the edge of the Tonga Trench. To his left, platform extended even further down towards the Hadal zone. An elevator sat at the platform center. A short distance down the trench, he saw endlessly long tendrils gently swaying with the current. They belonged to the body of the malformed creature, looking like it couldn't possibly control its own appendages. Yet, it seems unfazed by the depths.
Guys, are you seeing this?
He said excitedly as he pointed at the bizarre being.
It's a Magnapinna squid.
He almost jogged along at the edge to get a better view. The suit's undoubtedly exhausted by the effort. Don't put too much strain on the suit, Henry interjected over the radio.
It will be fine. What else did they pay for?
Mike asked. As he got closer to the squid, another popped up behind him. One with even larger appendages.
Damn, I never thought I'd see one so close.
Stop messing around and get on the elevator, Henry demanded.
Fine, let's not enjoy our jobs then,
Mike responded. He boarded the elevator and strapped himself in. The journey would take him another 15,000 feet into the abyss. It was a large, sturdy piece of machinery, able to withstand the immense pressure of the dreaded Hadal zone. Mike himself would control the speed of the descent, only handing the control to Henry, should something happen. Not long after the descent started, Mike started the elevator.
The suit is making weird noises.
That's normal, it's just adjusting the pressure change. We told you that it would happen the deeper you got, Henry explained with an annoyed tone.
Yeah, I know, but...
You'd be fine. 27,000 feet. Once more, Mike stopped the elevator, directing his gaze at the edge sticking out from the cliffside. On it lay a corpse of a bow-headed whale, almost half a planet away from its natural habitat. The whale had been partially hollowed out, riddled with deep sea eels and tiny eyeless fish, an entire ecosystem thriving from its death.
How did the whale get here?
Mike asked. It died, like all the other creatures down here, Henry said.
Yeah, but it's a bowhead. At least I think it is. Don't it live around the Arctic?
Henry sighed. Just continued the descent. 35,433 feet, horizon deep. The elevator reached the bottom from the trench after about an hour, allowing Mike to finally unbuckle himself from his seat. He grabbed a box of beacons to allow the next person to easily navigate the area. After stepping off the platform and getting away from the bright lights, it became abundantly clear that the bottom of the ocean was far from empty, and that the entire bed was covered with previously undiscovered life. Millions of fungal-like plants covered the floor, and a transparent fat shrimp swimming between, apparently feeding off them. On the cliff wall itself, Thousands of bioluminescent plants extended, just a stalk with a blue bulb bending in the direction of Mike's movement. It was hauntingly beautiful, looking as alien as anything from another planet. He continued along the cliffsides, putting down a beacon every 100 feet or so.
I half expected this place to be horrible,
Mike said.
You know, being named as the god of the underworld and all.
No one responded to his comments.
Guys, you can still hear me, right?
Yes, Mike, we can hear you, Henry said. We're here to work, not to make stupid quips.
Has anyone ever told you how much better life can be if you just at least enjoy it, Henry? Stop being such a killjoy. We're making history down here.
Henry didn't respond.
How about you hand Abby the radio? Hell, I'd rather listen to the captain ramble about protocol going on and on.
Mike stopped dead in his tracks, reaching the end of the cliff. Before him was a steep fall, leading down to an endless chasm of darkness.
Henry, are you sure the elevator took me all the way down the trench?
He asked as he stared into the abyss. Yes, you're at 35,000 feet.
Well, it's just that I'm standing at the edge of the cliff, and there's clearly not a bottom of the ocean.
That's impossible. We surveyed the area with a sonar.
Well, I'm telling you.
The ground beneath Mike crumbled into pieces. He slid off the edge of the cliff and dove further into the deep. The darkness now surrounded him was absolute. Nothing could possibly help him orient himself as he fell. The fall in the ocean was a much slower process, giving him time to think what kind of fate awaited him as he sank to the depths, never before known by mankind. He called out for his crew members, while desperately clawing at the cliff, but even with the suit, he was unable to slow his descent. As he got deeper, the suit started emitting loud beeps, alarms to alert rapid pressure changes, exceeding 16,000 psi. But before he could even react, he hit the ground hard. Mike fell silent, passed out from the impact. Unknown feet. The void. Minutes after landing, at unknown depths, Mike awoke to the sound of his suit beeping. The sound had held its ground and was starting to adjust to a new pressure. The manometer had broken, and with this tracking device malfunctioning, we could only try to guess how far he had fallen. Mike grunted as he got to his feet, taking some time to figure out what had happened.
Henry, you there?
He finally said. No response.
Captain? Anyone?
Apart from a few malfunctioning instruments, most of the suit seemed intact, yet no contact could be made within the base. Everything past that point would be after comms went down, and we had patiently awaited to learn of Mike's fate. Despite having fallen beyond what we believe to be the ocean floor, he had just landed on another plateau, with an endless distance still progressing downwards. The abyss was now present, taunting us with emptiness.
Please respond!
He begged, defeated. He activated the beacon still attached to him to check his surroundings. He had landed directly in the front of a cave, leading inside the cliff wall and moving steeply upwards. While protocol strictly dictated that wait for rescue in these situations, we could hear gargling sounds emitting from the cave. Whatever it was, it compelled Mike decided to check out the cave. The walls inside were perfectly smooth, an impossible formation of rocks reflecting the bright lights shining from the EPM suit. Lighting up the cave as far as it stretched, Mike started at the shiny walls for a moment, adjusting the light. They had seemed smooth at an angle, but when the light was pointed directly at them, it uncovered bizarre patterns, like symbols not corresponding to any known language. While he studied the symbols, a loud sound shook through the cave, almost sweeping Mike off his feet. It sounded similar to the biotwang, but with slight differences. The rhythm was changed. It seemed to put Mike further into trance, and he delightedly followed the source, ignoring any change of rescue the further he went in. The cave led to a much larger cavern, extending beyond the reach of any light source he had available. Unlike the tunnel, these walls weren't smooth, but were covered in millions of tiny holes, each perfectly round, each identical to the last. Upon closer inspections, the holes weren't empty, but filled with worms, just like the ones we had seen spew out of his body inside the airlock. They wriggled and reached for Mike as he walked through the cavern, pulled towards the sound in the distance, getting louder with each passing step. The deeper he got in, the less he seemed distracted by the holes, which were growing in size alongside the worms. Mike's only hypnotic objective was to reach the sound. On top of the worms, spinningly, long-legged creatures walked across. They looked like shellless spider crabs, dipping their limbs into the worms, merging temporarily while seeming to feed them. For each dip into the holes, their limbs grew shorter while the worms expanded. Eventually, he reached a corner of the cavern, and with it, the source of the sound. It was a half-consumed whale calf attached to the wall, bound by hundreds of massive worms extending into its torn flesh. Despite being half-eaten and broken beyond any chance at life, it somehow didn't succumb, as if the worms themselves kept it alive. Involuntary life support, repurposed for their own needs. The calf gaped open its half-eaten jaw, so mangled Mike could see straight into its vocal cords, which were also covered in worms, tugging and moving them into position. The whale screamed, emitting another jumbled sound that pulled Mike even closer. While Mike was distracted, several worms had emitted from the holes, rapidly swarming around him. Within seconds, they had joined together, wrapping around his legs and climbing up to the suit. They temporarily brought Mike back to sanity as he tried to tear off the worms, but they were fast, far faster than him, trapped inside a slow metal box. He stumbled to the ground, allowing more worms and the spindlers to cover each of his limbs. The creature merged together, forming a sheet of flesh that soon covered the entirety of his body. Mike fell silent, and the camera showed nothing but a flesh-colored mass, muffling any sound save for Mike's panicked breath. He screamed as the loud bang almost broke the speakers. The sound of his suit being perforated and the mesh refilling the hole he had found on the sole of his feet. The creature had gotten inside the suit, digging into his flesh. Mike crying in agony before falling silent. We all stood speechless, in front of the monitor, now displaying nothing but a timer, proving the camera was still running. Abby had left, with James following the console. "That can't be it," Robert said. "Let me forward it," Henry said, half whispering in shock. We forwarded through almost 3 days of nothing, while the worms incubated inside Mike, trapped along in the cavern, no one knowing where he was. The camera started clearing up, the flash sheet peeling off as the view showed that Mike had returned to the elevator. During the 3 days down the trench, the Synchtium had occupied, covering it with the flashy appendages, while Mike was controlling it, or whatever remained of him inside the suit. He wandered towards the station, flakes of sinential flesh falling off him for every step. His crew called out for him over the radio now that he could reach them, but Mike could do nothing but goggle as worms had consumed most of his lungs. At the airlock he stumbled inside, ready to unleash hell within the station, but for a brief moment Mike mangled to halt himself. Perhaps he thought of hurting those he loved was enough for him to temporarily gain control. Just enough time to shut down the airlock, putting himself into lockdown. Mike collapsed to the ground. He had died days ago, but his will remained even as he turned into nothing more than a vessel for the horrors he now carried within him. The footage ended. We stood in silence for a moment. None of us dared to speak a word about Mike's cause of death. I hardly believed it, despite having almost fallen victim to the same fate. "Henry, call headquarters. Tell them we're shutting this project down," Robert said, breaking the silence. "Jennifer, destroy the sample from the airlock. It's still sealed, right?" Jennifer nodded before heading towards the lab. "We need to make sure that whatever this is, it stays in the abyss." I joined Henry as he attempted to call headquarters. The radio returned nothing than jumbled static. Robert was checking all security feeds, sending out drones to scavenge for the Synchtium at the elevator. "Captain, the comms are completely down. Can't get any signal." On the security feed, we saw that the flesh of the Synchtium had been stretched along the ground, covering some of the corpses of the fish that littered the ocean floor. It was impossibly large, using the elevator and platform as a scaffold for climbing up towards the station. A loud mechanical clang sounded throughout the station, followed by an alarm. "What the hell was that?" I asked. "Yawl breach, Sector C," and an automatic voice said. "Isolate it," Robert demanded. "What about just do it?" he continued. Henry frantically tried to navigate the security system, attempting to get an idea as to the extent of the damage. "It's the lab, fucking hell! I hope Jennifer didn't get there yet," Henry said. While the station sealed, trapping anyone inside, another loud bang shook us. The alarm sounded again. "Hull breached, Sector B." "Fuck! What now?" Henry asked. Robert stood still in shock, frozen by the decision of saving the station or fleeing. "We have to evacuate," was all he could say.